Hi, everybody. My name is Astara, and I'm the publisher of Flower of Life Press. And I'm here with our author, Mary Kathleen Kathy McKenna. Welcome, Kathy.
Good morning. It's wonderful to be with you.
Yay. And today we're talking about Kathy's book, Whistling Up the South Wind. This is part 2 of The Power of Symbolism. And last time in our last video, we spoke about the symbolism in the book around the snake. And today I wanted to ask you, Kathy, about the symbolism with numbers and how you're incorporating in some of these deeper layers of esoteric wisdom into the book itself. So can you talk to us a little bit about how the story of Whistling Up the South Wind begins 7 years after an event? Can you tell us what that is
Sure.
all about and what the significance of those 7 years?
Sure, Ken. Let me go back a little bit first about the power of numbers and why using numbers as symbolism or to have meaning. Um, I am always trying when I'm teaching or writing, especially for women, to think differently, look differently, and see the world in a different way, and to ask questions. And so, one of the things that fascinated me many years ago was that there are languages such as Greek and other languages, Hebrew and others, that in ancient times they did not have symbols for the numbers. And so, letters represented letters that came together for words, but also represented the number, which would come together in different ways to represent a different meaning than what the surface of the word looked like. And so learning about for the traditions of numbers and what they meant to people tells us much about the people and about the women and what was important. So I think in terms of numbers when I write, because I'm always trying to challenge myself to think out of not being linear,
Mhm.
which is one of the reasons I started the book 7 years later, because I really was looking at developing a spiral pattern.
Mm.
Seven, if you think about in gambling, for example, excuse me, sorry, in gambling, seven is the lucky dice, the lucky number to get in gambling. And so we live every day with the symbolism from the ancient past. We're just not aware of it. So
Mhm.
seven was one of the most sacred numbers. In some traditions, it appears that those were the visible planets. I've read sources on that. However, I don't believe in any way that our ancients didn't know more about the skies and the whole universe, as above, so below, more than we do today and more than we're taught. So I think they knew the planets that were out there. And there are some traditions that believe that we all are descended from other stars, other universes.
Yeah.
I think it's important to think in that way and to ask the questions that makes us think outside ourselves. The other thing with the number seven, besides it being a very sacred number for women, I wanted to start out showing the power of a relationships that are fairly short time, but the power of the adventure and the experience they had together and how meaningful that was and how important for each of the women and the pets who were part of it. They really represented a community. It
Mhm.
was intentional. There were three women of three different ages.
Mhm.
If we think about the measurement of time, for example, is by the stages of the moon, and we see the stages of the moon and always have, even to this day, we think of it as the woman. We say man in the moon, but we measure time by the maiden, matron, and crone.
Mm.
That three was significant, and that's exactly the ages of the women that I brought together. Krista, who is a runaway teenager, who I didn't realize. I did a presentation at my old childhood library last week, and I had one of the participants tell me it was very brave to write about Krista being raped and having to make decisions. And I didn't think of it as bravery. I thought of it as an issue for women that needed to be written about, and for women to think of the complexities, the significance of it, and the significance of men trying to take away the power of our bodies and making decisions of birth and life around us and our families and our communities. So I wanted to build in the young woman. I also intentionally, because my whole background is working with people with developmental and intellectual disabilities. So Krista happens to be a woman who also has cerebral palsy, a young woman. But she was the teenager who was angry with her parents and the situation at her home. And so she ran away with a small missionary group, and then eventually ends up, and you have to read the story to see how she ends up with Granny Rose. But she was the first human, the first woman that comes aboard. And Granny Anna Marie, which also is symbolic, her name, Anna Marie, which goes back to the ancient mother, and to Mother Earth. All of this is connected, and it's relevant that these are feminine symbols, which tells us that our ancients revered feminine, revered the capacity of women to be able to produce life and to support life. And that women were central to their societies, not in the background sitting around the fire as often depicted. So Anna Marie begins her journey with Little Bear, who's her pug dog, but the first very being that she adopts is little stray Maine Coon kitten, actually, who comes aboard. And she ends up with also, besides Little Bear and Maya as the name that she names the little Maine Coon cat, and Circe, who is an African gray bird who's really somewhat obnoxious, but he makes up a great threesome. And then, of course, a little later in the journey, not too far, Granny Rose stows aboard unsuspectingly, and they don't realize that she does. So it was intentional that I chose the stages of life that I did for the women. Also to emphasize the importance of women of all ages, diversity and backgrounds, knowing we have to support each other. We need to be there for each other, and to be able to help each other develop and help them work through some of the issues that they're challenged by.
I love that, Kathy, that you've brought in the wisdom of these different phases in a woman's life path. Teenager, maiden to matron, mother phase to crone, wisdom. And it's interesting that you mentioned at your library talk that one of the participants was surprised at how brave you were for writing about taboo topics like rape or unwed pregnancies and whatnot, because it just goes to show how vulnerable and scary it can be to speak truth. And to when the patriarchy has normalized all of that violence, perhaps. And so it is amazing that your story is sparking this curiosity from this participant, like, oh, that is courageous of her to write about that. Where in my own life can I spark some more courage to speak truth, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's disruptive to the norm? And I think that's the beauty of your work, is that there isn't a nature of disruption, because you're bringing forward these ideas around the divine feminine and around our power as women and our sisterhood, the ability to be there for each other and to hold space as we just sort of keep moving forward in time through this spiral into the next phase of the journey. So that's really special, those pieces. And is there anything else that you want to share about the symbolism around the numbers in the book? Are there a certain number of chapters that is relevant, or any other time patterns that you've created? I do believe we do go back and forth in time a little bit throughout the book, right?
Yeah, I intended it to be a modern day story, but always intended it was going to go back to history in the past, which in following the cycles of the moon gets into the depth, is actually the precursor to Granny Rose coming on the South Wind, and it's Granny Rose's story.
Mm.
Excuse me.
Mhm.
I'm sorry. It's the allergies.
Yeah, oh yeah.
The names are intentional, though they're intentional, but the characters grow with me and become part of me.
Yeah.
And so I don't start out any of my books knowing where the ending is going to be. And it just comes. Sometimes some of my best thinking times are driving. And so the storyline will come, and then I have to get someplace quickly and write down the storyline or notes and to be able to remember. But I wanted intentionally, again, the spiral pattern.
Mhm.
And so we have the spiral of this is 7 years later. The three women and the 3 pets that are part of the South Wind Gang, they
Yeah.
call themselves. And then as we get to following the cycles of the moon, that begins very far back. Well, it begins in the present. It's still present with Anna Marie as the central character connecting everyone.
Mhm.
It's interesting, by the way, this month, Powered by Connections is, this is Older Americans Month. And they've selected the topic powered by connections and the importance of connections for older people. I think it's importance of connections for all of us of all ages. And that's what I was trying to show in Whistling Up the Wind. And I continue in following the cycles of the moon, going back in time because Anna Marie is asked to go down to Louisiana and learn from the family. And she's actually given a DVD that Granny Rose has left that has the story of Granny Rose's life. And she wants Anna Marie to visit the places that are on the DV and to learn from the people that she meets in the places that she goes to. And
Mhm.
so going backwards again and connecting all of that happened to Anna Marie and finding that there are connections to Krista and connections to Granny Rose. I don't believe that there are chances and coincidences. I think even in writing the story, it wasn't a coincidence of how I brought it together. I just thought, oh, this is the way to go. It came to me, this is the way that it had to be.
Yeah.
And I have amazingly met women who have the same names, who have relationships of people of the names in the book that
Mhm.
actually get goosebumps when they read Whistling Up the Wind because it feels like part of their life story as well. And that just thrills me because that's what I wanted to do, make those connections.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Kathy, for these great insights into the work and into the themes that you're weaving into the whole series. And the next book in the series is Following the Cycles of the Moon. And we're going to do some video and some interviewing around those topics too. Next time, we're going to discuss the power of intuition, women's intuition, and the connections again between magic and science and how you weave those into the stories. So stay tuned, everybody. And if you have not yet read Whistling Up the South Wind, you can get this on Amazon, and we'll look forward to seeing you again for the next video. Thank you so much, Kathy.
Thank you. It's a joy to do this.